things that that happens to me frequently is that I get a call from a reporter, like Dick Mile, or people around the state working at various papers, and a common question I get, they'll say, you know, Mike, we're used to seeing maybe $1,000 spent on a city council race or $500 spent on this little town board race. And now we've got one where the spending's up to $10,000 or $15,000. Are you seeing that anywhere else? And of course my answer is, yeah. You know, I talk to reporters from Appleton or from Beloit or from Racine or from Wausau, and they're all asking the same question. Am I seeing that phenomenon anywhere else? Because it is playing out everywhere. And then you look at like state assembly. 25 years ago, $6,000 or $8,000 was a lot of money to spend on a state assembly campaign. State senate races, if you spent 20 grand, that was a fortune. 30,000 was like off the charts. Well, we've now, in 2008, we had our first $1 million assembly race. And we've had state senate campaigns cost as much as $3 million. We had a $6 million state Supreme Court race, an $8 million Attorney General race, and the last race for governor cost $32 million. One of my concerns, and one of the benefits of my job, is that it also gives me an opportunity to go around to every corner of the state and speak to a variety of groups. One day it'll be a League of Women Voters function, maybe an AARP group, then I'm talking in a high school classroom or on a college campus. And I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to audiences and interacted with an audience, and you'll always pick somebody out of the crowd. And you'll think, that person would really make an excellent candidate for public office. You go up to them afterwards, and you say, have you ever thought about running for state assembly or state senate, something like that? And I can't tell you how often they'll say, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to have to raise the kind of money that is needed to do that. I don't want to have my family and my name dragged through the mud. And so I think we're really experiencing a tremendous loss of talent, which then leads to a loss of true competitiveness in our elections. And I think what the cause of it is basically the commercialization of the First Amendment. The First Amendment is increasingly becoming not a right that belongs to everybody, but a privilege that has to be purchased. It's becoming a commodity, and to run for public office and to enter that public square and to engage in political speech, you have to have boatloads of money. If you're going to run for assembly, you better be prepared to be in a six-figure race, maybe even seven figures. We had one of those this year. State Senate, it's 7 figures. Statewide office, it's 7 figures. How many people have the friends and neighbors and people they work with who can supply them with that kind of cash? So we now increasingly have a situation where you either have to be independently wealthy or willing to take out a second mortgage on your soul to compete for public office. That's not the way it ought to be. And that's why I'm a big champion of public financing of elections. We need to create a system where people have the means to get a message out to the voters and compete for public office without having access to such an extraordinary sum of money. And public financing is the only constitutional way to have enforceable spending limits in campaigns. It's the only way to get these campaigns back under control in terms of cost. So there is a solution out there, and it's been constitutionally upheld. I think we're darn fools for not jumping on it and insisting upon it and putting it in place in Wisconsin, because what we're doing is we're pricing an awful lot of people out of the political marketplace, and in every community I go to, I run into somebody who's been effectively priced out of the marketplace and just doesn't want to do it, but would be really an outstanding public servant. And probably there's a few of those people sitting in this audience tonight who would think about it and say, I don't want anything to do with that. With the grubby business of all this campaign fundraising, I don't want to have to deal with it. That to me is a canary in a coal mine. It says that there's something toxic that has infected our politics, and we got to deal with that.
What do you recommend now that people would do to take action in terms of these bills, the impartial justice bill, the special interest disclosure bill, or other efforts that people need to take at this point as a way of maybe wrapping this up then?
I hope people will sign the petition. We just dropped off a stack of them with hundreds and hundreds of signatures with legislators at the public hearing next Wednesday. We'll drop off more if people sign it. I hope people will contact their legislators, their representatives in the Assembly and the Senate. I hope they'll send a message to the governor. But more than anything, I would go back to what Cesar Chavez said when he was asked by a college student about the secret of his organizing prowess. How did he create these masses of farm workers who would fight for their rights? And Chavez told this college student, you talk to one person, then another, and then another. And the kid said, no, I mean, how do you organize? And he said, you talk to one person, then another, and then another. And that's what I would say. Find a neighbor or a friend or a coworker or somebody and talk to them about this stuff. Take the risk of doing what we're all taught not to do in polite company. You're all taught not to talk about religion or politics, and we got to talk about politics, and we got to talk about courts, and you know, I really wish that people would do more of what you suggested at the beginning. When an election comes around, find somebody you trust, find a lawyer, find somebody in the profession, find somebody who's well studied on the issues, talk to them about it, but then go and talk to somebody else who's feeling a little clueless about what's happening and feeling vulnerable and feeling like they're ill-informed. That's the biggest thing, is just talk to people. But you know, I don't want to discourage you from taking all the other tangible steps, because we need that too.
I think there are two possibilities here. The universe of choices that I think are viable choices is two. One, we can go to public financing and then everybody participates in public financing. Because it isn't going to work if Wisconsin manufacturers can pour in $3 million or $6 million into a race and you're on public financing, good luck. So it has to apply across the board in order to create an even playing field and give the objective a chance. That would be one viable option to change how we do business now. The other that I certainly am not promoting, but I recognize is out there, is an appointed judiciary. And that is the other option. I don't favor that, but that is certainly the federal model, and that's how it's done for federal judgeships. That process has its problems too. There is no ideal solution here, but many of the concerns that have been addressed here about an informed electorate are dealt with in a much different way by using the appointed model. What you do then is you create some kind of a system by which candidates can be evaluated, narrowed down, and the names forwarded to whomever, so that ultimately now in Wisconsin we have 2 Western District federal judgeships that are open, and we have some way we've got to get those names to President Obama to make a decision.
I would just mention that for state judicial elections, moving to an appointed process would require an amendment to our Constitution. We already have that at the federal level, but to get it at the state level would require the Constitution to be amended, which means that 2 successive legislatures would have to approve the change, and then voters in a statewide referendum would have to ratify it. So the voters of the state would have to vote to take away their ability to vote in these elections. I don't think that's going to happen.
And I said at the beginning, I'm not promoting.
And I would agree with you wholeheartedly that there's no perfect system, that every system has its drawbacks and its strengths, but I cannot imagine how we can get from point A to point B to get an amended Constitution and move to an appointed process. So that's where I come down on the side of let's do something to repair our elections. Because we're going to have elections, and the question is whether we're going to have auctions or whether we're going to have elections. And right now we're having auctions, and that doesn't serve any of us well. But if somebody can figure out how you persuade the majority of the members of the legislature and the majority of the voters in the state to move to amend the Constitution, then that would be I agree, a viable option for discussion. I don't know how that happens in Wisconsin.